Hi, welcome to Conflict Story, where we bring you the best and most fascinating stories just for you. Let's dive right into one of those stories. It begins like this.
I never thought I'd have to defend my own property from someone trying to evict my family, but life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. This is the story of how an entitled woman named Karen tried to kick my nephew out of my house, only to get a shocking reality check about who she was dealing with. My name is Linda, and I'm a 55-year-old graphic designer. I've lived in the same charming bungalow in a small coastal town for nearly 30 years. I bought the house with my late partner, and over time, it's become a sanctuary filled with memories. Recently, my 21-year-old nephew, Alex, moved in with me. He's a great kid, polite, ambitious, and a huge help around the house. Alex is in his final year of studying marine biology and works part-time at the local aquarium to cover his expenses while finishing his degree. Our neighborhood is a mix of older residents, like myself, and younger families who've moved in over the years. It's generally a peaceful place, but things took a dramatic turn when Karen and her family moved into the big modern house down the street. Karen, who appeared to be in her early 40s, came with an air of superiority. Her meticulously styled red hair and designer outfits were always paired with a condescending attitude. From the start, she made it clear she saw herself as the neighborhood's unofficial authority. Karen would often send passive-aggressive notes about everything from trash bins being left out too long to how someone's porch decor wasn't up to community standards. At first, I shrugged off her antics, thinking she'd settle in and mind her own business. That illusion shattered one Saturday morning when she stormed into my front yard while I was watering my plants. "Good morning, Karen," I greeted, already bracing for whatever complaint she had today. She folded her arms and stared at me with a tight-lipped expression. "Linda, we need to talk about your situation." Confused, I set down the watering can. "My situation?" Her gaze darted toward my house. "Yes, your nephew. Several neighbors and I have noticed him coming and going at odd hours. We're concerned about the kind of activity he might be involved in." I felt a flicker of anger, but kept my voice calm. "Karen, Alex works part-time at the aquarium, and his shifts sometimes start early or end late. There's nothing suspicious about it." She raised an eyebrow. "Well, be that as it may, this is a family-oriented community. Having a young single man living here just doesn't fit the image we're trying to maintain. It affects property values and sets a bad precedent." I could hardly believe what I was hearing. "Karen, Alex is family. This is his home as much as it is mine." Karen's smile was cold. "As president of the Homeowners Association, I'm afraid I have to insist he find alternative accommodations within 30 days. It's for the good of the neighborhood, Linda." "President of the Homeowner Association?" I repeated, baffled. "Last I checked, we don't have a homeowners association." Her expression faltered for a moment before she replied, "We've recently organized one to ensure the neighborhood stays desirable. I'm simply enforcing the agreed-upon standards." I crossed my arms, my patience wearing thin. "Karen, let me be very clear. I've lived here long before you ever set foot on this street. My property is not under the jurisdiction of any homeowner association, imaginary or otherwise. You have no authority to dictate who can live in my house." Karen's face turned bright red. "You'll regret taking this tone with me," she snapped before storming off. The encounter left me fuming, but I wasn't about to let her baseless threats ruin my day. I called a few of my longtime neighbors to inform them of Karen's antics. To my relief, they were just as appalled by her behavior as I was. One even mentioned seeing her go door to door trying to recruit people into her so-called homeowner association. Later that evening, I explained the situation to Alex, who was understandably upset. "Maybe I should move out," he offered. "I don't want to cause you any trouble." "Absolutely not," I said firmly. "Your family, Alex. This is your home, and we're not letting some busybody push us around." Determined to put an end to Karen's antics, I began documenting everything. Every note she left, every conversation we had, and every neighbor she harassed went into a file. I also reached out to a friend who worked as a property lawyer for advice on how to handle the situation legally. What Karen didn't realize was that she had picked the wrong person to mess with. By the time I was done, I had a plan to expose her schemes and ensure she'd think twice before meddling in anyone else's life again. Little did I know, this confrontation was just the beginning of a neighborhood battle that would escalate far beyond anything I could have anticipated. The next few weeks felt like a chess game with Karen making her moves and me carefully countering each one. She escalated her efforts by filing baseless complaints with the town council, claiming my house was violating zoning ordinances. Thankfully, her accusations didn't hold up under scrutiny, and each case was dismissed. But her persistence made it clear that she wasn't going to back down easily. Karen's tactics weren't limited to paperwork. One evening, Alex found a note taped to his car windshield, written in Karen's familiar looping handwriting. It read, "This neighborhood is no place for freeloaders. You're a burden to this community." Alex was visibly shaken, and I felt my anger rise to a boiling point. Enough was enough. The next morning, I decided it was time to rally the neighborhood. I printed flyers inviting everyone to a community meeting at my house to discuss Karen's self-appointed authority. By evening, the living room was packed with neighbors, many of whom shared their own frustrating encounters with her. Stories ranged from petty complaints about holiday decorations to intrusive questions about people's personal lives. "She told me my kids' toys were an eyesore and asked me to keep them in the backyard," said Maria, a mother of 3 who lived 2 houses down. "Who does that?" "She tried to tell me I needed to repaint my front door because it wasn't an approved color," added Mr. Patel, an elderly widower who'd lived in the neighborhood even longer than I had. Hearing these stories solidified my resolve. Together, we drafted a petition demanding Karen cease her harassment and clarified that the neighborhood had no intention of forming a homeowners association. Nearly every resident signed it, and I made sure to include a copy in the growing file of documentation I was keeping. A few days later, I took the petition to Karen's house. She opened the door with a smug expression that quickly faded when I handed her the stack of signatures. "What is this?" she demanded, flipping through the pages. "It's a statement from the neighborhood," I said, keeping my voice steady. "We've had enough of your harassment and false claims. The residents of this community have made it clear that they don't recognize you as any sort of authority. It's time for you to stop." Her face turned red, and for a moment she looked genuinely at a loss for words. But Karen being Karen, she quickly regained her composure. "This changes nothing," she said stiffly. "I'm only trying to improve the neighborhood. You'll all thank me someday." I sighed. "Karen, improvement doesn't come through bullying and lies. If you continue this behavior, we're prepared to take legal action." Her expression darkened. "Legal action? On what grounds?" "Harassment, defamation, and filing false complaints," I replied calmly. "I've been documenting everything, and I've consulted a lawyer. This is your chance to step back before things escalate further." Karen didn't respond. Instead, she slammed the door in my face. I walked away feeling a mixture of frustration and satisfaction. While I didn't expect her to change overnight, I hoped the petition and the threat of legal consequences would make her think twice about continuing her crusade. For a while, it seemed to work. Karen kept a low profile, and the neighborhood felt more peaceful. Alex and I were able to go about our lives without constant interference, and I started to think we'd finally turned a corner. But then, just as things were settling down, Karen played her most outrageous card yet. One afternoon, as I was returning from the grocery store, I found a city inspector on my property, clipboard in hand. He informed me that a complaint had been filed claiming I was running an unauthorized business out of my home. According to the report, my nephew's presence and his part-time job somehow constituted a violation of local ordinances. I was livid. "This is ridiculous," I told the inspector, who seemed apologetic but insisted he had to follow up on all complaints. I invited him inside, showed him Alex's school records and proof of his employment at the aquarium, and made it abundantly clear that no business was being run from my home. He left satisfied, but the damage was done. That evening, Alex was unusually quiet at dinner. When I asked what was wrong, he hesitated before admitting, "I'm starting to feel like a burden, Aunt Linda. Maybe Karen's right. Maybe I shouldn't be here." Hearing him doubt himself broke my heart. "Alex, listen to me," I said firmly. "Karen is wrong. She's a bully who thrives on making others feel small. You have every right to be here, and I won't let her push you out." He nodded, though his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. I knew we needed a definitive solution to end this, once and for all. It was time to take the battle to the next level. Karen's latest stunt pushed me to my limit, and I knew I had to act decisively. It was no longer just about defending Alex and our right to live in peace. It was about showing Karen that her antics wouldn't intimidate us. If she wanted to play dirty, I was ready to meet her head-on, within the bounds of the law, of course. The next day, I met with my friend Diane, a retired attorney who specialized in property disputes. After explaining the situation, she helped me draft a cease and desist letter that laid out Karen's harassment in detail, supported by the evidence I'd been collecting. The letter warned Karen that if her behavior continued, I would file a formal complaint and pursue legal action for defamation and harassment. This should get her attention, Diane said as she handed me the final draft. But be prepared. People like Karen often double down before they back off. That evening, I delivered the letter myself. Karen opened the door with her usual air of superiority, but her confidence wavered when she saw the legal stationery. "What's this?" she asked, her voice tight. "It's a formal request for you to stop your harassment," I replied. "I suggest you read it carefully. If you continue to interfere in my life or spread false accusations, you'll be facing legal consequences." Karen's face turned an alarming shade of red. "You're bluffing," she snapped. "I'm just trying to maintain the integrity of this neighborhood." I smiled coldly. "This neighborhood's integrity doesn't rely on your lies and intimidation. Consider this your last warning." Without waiting for her response, I turned and walked away, feeling a surge of satisfaction. But Diane's words stayed with me. Karen wouldn't give up without a fight, and I needed to be ready for whatever she threw next. Sure enough, Karen's retaliation came swiftly. 2 days later, I received a visit from a pair of police officers. Apparently, Karen had reported a suspicious individual lurking around my property, a not-so-subtle reference to Alex. The officers were polite but thorough, and after I explained the situation and showed them my documentation, they apologized for the inconvenience and left. "She's escalating," I told Alex that evening as we sat in the kitchen. "But so am I." Over the next week, I took action on multiple fronts. First, I filed a formal complaint with the town council, detailing Karen's pattern of harassment and including signed statements from several neighbors. Next, I contacted a local journalist who covered community issues and shared my story. The journalist was intrigued and promised to look into Karen's behavior. The turning point came during the town council meeting 2 weeks later. The room was packed with residents, many of whom had come to support me. Karen was there too, sitting stiffly in the front row, her expression a mixture of indignation and unease. When it was my turn to speak, I presented my case calmly and clearly. I outlined Karen's attempts to fabricate an homeowner association, her baseless complaints to the city, and her harassment of me and Alex. I even provided copies of the cease and desist letter and the police report from her false accusation. "This isn't about maintaining the neighborhood," I concluded. "It's about one person's attempt to impose their will on others through intimidation and deceit. We're here to say enough is enough." The room erupted in applause. Several neighbors took the floor after me, sharing their own stories of Karen's interference. By the time the meeting ended, the council had agreed to issue Karen a formal warning and investigate her actions further. The following week, the journalist's article was published, detailing Karen's antics and highlighting the community's stand against her. The piece painted a clear picture of a woman who had overstepped her bounds, and the public backlash was swift. Karen's reputation in the neighborhood was in tatters, and for the first time, she seemed genuinely shaken. Alex and I watched from the porch as Karen's for sale sign went up a month later. While I didn't take pleasure in her downfall, I couldn't deny the relief of knowing we'd reclaimed our peace. "I guess that's the end of Karen," Alex said with a small smile. I nodded, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. "Let's hope so. But if there's one thing this has taught me, it's that standing up for yourself and your community is always worth it." As we sat there watching the sunset, I felt a renewed sense of gratitude for our little corner of the world. It had been a tough battle, but we'd come through stronger, and no amount of Karen's drama could take that away from us. Despite the relief of Karen putting her house up for sale, the final chapter of this saga held one last twist. Though she had been largely quiet since the town council meeting, Karen wasn't quite ready to disappear without leaving her mark. True to her dramatic nature, she attempted one final stunt that almost derailed our hard-earned peace. A week before Karen was scheduled to move out, I noticed an unusual amount of activity at her house. Trucks came and went, and Karen was spotted giving instructions to workers assembling something in her backyard. Curiosity got the better of me, and I discreetly asked my neighbor, Maria, if she'd seen anything. "Oh, I've seen it all right," Maria replied with a frown. "She's putting up a massive fence along her property line. It's tall enough to block the view of the ocean from your porch." My heart sank. The view of the ocean was one of the reasons I had fallen in love with my home all those years ago. Karen's spiteful fence felt like her last-ditch attempt to punish me for standing up to her. The next morning, I walked over to her property and called out to one of the workers. "Excuse me, could I speak to whoever's in charge here?" A foreman came over, clipboard in hand. "How can I help you, ma'am?" I gestured to the towering structure being erected. "Can you confirm if this fence complies with local regulations? It looks taller than what's allowed." The foreman hesitated. "You'd have to check with the homeowner. We're just following her instructions." Unsurprisingly, Karen refused to come to the door when I rang the bell. So I went back home, pulled out my trusty folder of documents, and made a few phone calls. Within a day, I had my answer. Karen's fence exceeded the legal height limit by at least 3 feet. Armed with this information, I contacted the town council and filed a formal complaint. A city inspector arrived the next day to assess the situation. Karen's face was a picture of barely concealed rage as the inspector measured the fence and issued a citation. She was ordered to bring the structure into compliance or face hefty fines. "This is harassment," she yelled at me from her porch as the inspector left. "You just can't leave me alone, can you?" I stayed calm. "Karen, all I've ever wanted is to live in peace. If you'd done the same, none of this would have happened." Karen glared at me but said nothing, retreating into her house. Over the next few days, workers dismantled the top portion of the fence, restoring my view and finally putting an end to Karen's reign of pettiness. On the day Karen officially moved out, a strange sense of finality settled over the neighborhood. Alex and I watched from the porch as the moving truck pulled away. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. The neighborhood quickly returned to its former sense of camaraderie. Without Karen's interference, residents grew closer, and our little community became stronger. Alex's confidence flourished, and he soon landed a full-time job in marine biology, allowing him to start planning for his future while still staying close to home. A few weeks later, the house that once belonged to Karen was bought by a lovely couple with 2 young children. They introduced themselves with a plate of cookies and genuine smiles, a stark contrast to their predecessor. It felt like a fresh start for everyone. One evening, as Alex and I sat on the porch watching the sunset, he turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "You know, Aunt Linda, you've taught me a lot through all of this." "Oh?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "Yeah," he said, smiling. "You showed me how important it is to stand up for yourself and to never let anyone bully you into silence. You also showed me that even the most frustrating situations can be handled with grace and determination." I smiled, feeling a swell of pride. "Well, Alex, life will always throw challenges our way. The key is to face them head on, with integrity and persistence. And remember, no matter what, you'll always have a place here." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. The battle with Karen had been exhausting, but it had also reminded me of the strength of community and the importance of standing up for what's right. Sometimes the most difficult people in our lives can teach us the most valuable lessons. And as I watched Alex's newfound confidence shine, I knew that every confrontation, every moment of doubt, and every victory had been worth it. Are you hungry for more slices of stories? Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell to never miss out on any videos. See you tomorrow.